Donato's is legendary for putting so much on their pizzas, but just listen to what they're taking off. Right now, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's, gotta love more.
The Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brady Batiste, give me the rock. Here it goes. I'm up and away. Slam jam bam, and now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. It's my official duty to welcome you into episode 550 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Welcome to the off-season that coincides with the opening of the transfer portal. We were, or at least I was, sitting in a chair last night watching one shining moment getting underway, and it was at that point that the clock ticked past midnight. It became April 7th, and the transfer portal officially opened. So, different calendar this year. We've talked about this, and this certainly has not stopped players from announcing their plans to enter the transfer portal. I think we'd all be naive to say that it has stopped programs from conversing with those people or people close to them, even though they're not officially in the portal yet. That's just kind of how this whole thing has played out this year and how it's all structured. But we are officially at the time of year where, as of this morning, players are allowed to enter the transfer portal. Teams can contact them. Teams can recruit them. Teams can start hosting guys on visits and signing guys. Like, it's all going to really start get underway here. It will also make things a lot less awkward to write about, as I've had to write 4 different times to this point, as Ohio State has had players leave. It's not been the language of is intending to enter the transfer portal. Will enter the transfer portal when it opens on April 7th. Way more needlessly complicated than just simply saying is entering the transfer portal, has entered the transfer portal. So on my end, everything gets a little bit easier in that regard now. But got a couple of things to talk about here as things get underway. And I'll just say, like, right off the top, I mean, the Buckeyes are getting going. Certainly, recruiting is ongoing. I have the transfer tracker up at dispatch.com. The only name in it at the moment is Jalen Harrelson, Notre Dame player in the portal after his freshman year, double-digit scorer for the Fighting Irish, had 13 points against the Buckeyes. That's the one name that has been out there publicly that Ohio State has already begun to show interest in. As we all know, that transfer tracker will pick up steam here very quickly. I'll be updating it every time there's a new name to put on there. And I keep it to names that Ohio State has been linked with. I've got a list of some guys that are interesting to me for various reasons. And it doesn't even mean interesting to me because I think Ohio State will get them, but just there's a couple of guys that I see them in the portal and I find it interesting. So I'll run down that here in a little bit, as well as the fact that we're going to, we got to break down the latest Ohio State entries into the transfer portal. It was a busy weekend where the Buckeyes saw Colin White, Gabe Cupps, and Tayson Chapman all enter the transfer portal, joining Devin Royal in the portal as well. That's where things stand at this point. Really, the only wild card I think that's left on this roster is Matthew Griachich. And I did see John Rothstein over at CBS had Ohio State, I think, 19th in his way too early preseason poll for next year. And that included Matthew Griachich as the starting guard alongside John Mobley Jr. That would be surprising to me. There's not been any sort of official indication one way or the other. I've long viewed him as unlikely to return, but he did speak about how much he enjoyed his time at Ohio State when I talked to him in the locker room in Greenville. Talked about how frustrating it was to be injured during the season. I would expect him to be applying for a medical red shirt. We'll see where that ends up. There's been no public indication either way. So that's kind of the one wild card left on the roster here. But otherwise, we're going to get into the guys that are leaving, and then some thoughts on where this ultimately could all be headed here in the next 2 weeks. The portal is open for 2 weeks. So it's been interesting. I feel like this has been more manageable, like from like my work perspective and my viewpoint on covering this, that like not having it open for seemingly forever and also not having it officially open until after the tournament is done I prefer it. I think I enjoyed it more this year because I was able to enjoy watching the tournament, covering the tournament, and we weren't all talking about how many players are already in the portal. And it wasn't hey, we got brackets, and now look, there's 1,400 players that are entering the transfer portal also today. Like, that stunk. I don't think anybody enjoyed that. So I'm enjoying this better. Ask me again in the offseason if this ultimately worked better, and I'm sure coaches have their own thoughts on it. There's not really a great way to do it in college basketball, I don't think, but I think this is a better setup than what we've seen. So let's get into all of it, and we'll talk a little bit too about the national championship game last night and watching Michigan cut down the nets. But before we get to all that, I want to remind you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review, please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks to all of you who've taken the time to do all those things. Donato's is legendary for putting so many toppings on their pizzas, but just wait till you hear what they're taking off. For a very limited time, when you buy any large Donato's pizza, you can add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. That's right, half off. You order using promo code HALF. Order your favorite large Donato's pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off today. Donato's, gotta love more. I should also point out that, as I mentioned on a previous podcast, I ended up inadvertently having 2 different bracket challenges going this year. There was the Beat the Beat Writer one, and then we had quite a few people sign up to the one from last year, which was Beat the Beat Writer 2025. And I'm not going to penalize anybody for my own stupidity. So this is the public acknowledgement that in the Beat the Beat Writer bracket challenge, Matt Hartle won with 134 points. He picked Michigan to win the whole thing. And Matt, you are hereby invited to join the podcast. I'll reach out, find your email address, and get in contact, and hopefully we can set something up. And then in the Beat the Beat Writer 2025, George Kademanos, and George, I apologize. Please come on the podcast and tell me how to pronounce your last name, and I will do a better job of that, I swear. But George also had Michigan. He actually had 139 points. So technically, if you merge the two, George was our top winner. But happy to have both of you guys on at some point here to talk about your brackets, how you did so well at it, why I stink at it. In the Beat the Beat Writer bracket, I finished 43rd, and I should point out that in my family, I finished last. My wife was number 1. She just beat our youngest son, Owen. He finished second in the Jardy household. Liam was third, and I was dead last. So I guess some things never change. But thanks to everyone who took part in that, and I will make sure that there is no confusion next year and that we are all on the same page, competing against each other. All right, so Easter weekend, got time with my family. But this time of year in this job, you just know, like, wherever you go, bring your laptop. I brought my laptop to pins. I've brought my laptop to soccer games. I've brought my laptop to lunch. Like, it is what it is this time of year. And it was a good thing that I brought it with me when I went to go see my family for Easter, because it's a busy weekend. And we're at a spot now where Ohio State has essentially cleared the decks. The bench is wide open. The middle to end of the rotation is wide open. And Ohio State is going to, more than ever, need to be effective at a high level in the portal if it wants to maximize what it can be next season. So Ohio State loses Tayson Chapman, Gabe Cupps, Colin White. I think it's pretty obvious, looking at how the seasons went and looking at what each one of those players was able to do, that Tayson was the highest priority for retention there. It was always a long shot that they were going to keep more than one of those three. And certainly had one player coming or going could have impacted the other one. And if it was strictly my choice, I would have fought to keep Taysom. I think there's probably, we can all agree, the highest ceiling there. We've seen the most production and potential there. But now that this does clear that back half of the roster. Ohio State at this moment, when you look at next season, it's a roster that has John Mobley Jr., Amari Bynum, Ivan Yagovin will be back. He hasn't made a public announcement, but he will be back. Josh Ojonwuno will be back. I wrote about that a month ago. That hasn't changed. And then they will bring in Anthony Thompson and Alex Smith. And then after that, it's kind of an open question mark. Certainly the two guys at the end of the roster, Miles Hero and Braylon Nash, they don't really factor into this. And if they're both at Ohio State next season, then they won't be in the group of players that Ohio State will ultimately end up paying. And this does look like a situation where Ohio State's going to end up with a shorter rotation of players that are being paid as contributors. And obviously these things are different now with rev share payments and scholarships and all these things, like the way that this all works and how it impacts building a roster is different than it was a couple years ago. But for the purposes of where is Ohio State going to spend its NIL and its revenue sharing money on this roster, Miles and Braylon both could be back on the team next year, but they're not going to be in that group. So we had an Ohio State team last year that had, how many guys total? Ohio State ended up at 15 by the end with Puff Johnson. Yeah, there were 15 players in the roster. 13 of them were being paid as contributing type players. Ohio State will not be paying 13 players that level of funds this year. I would expect Ohio State to be closer to 10, maybe 11. We'll see how this plays out. But Ohio State does enter this offseason in a better spot financially. The Buckeyes have a better understanding of what resources they have, how they can allocate them. And certainly losing a couple of guys to the portal frees up some funds as well. I mean, Devin Royal was expensive. Retaining him was a priority last season. Ohio State frees up some money there. Taysom Chapman, Gabe Cupps, Colin White, all three of them were none of them were breaking the bank per se, and I can't specifically say how much any one of them was making, but that's 4 players off your roster that clears up a significant chunk. Plus the players that graduate and move on. I mean, Bruce Thornton was obviously the highest paid player on that roster, and Christoph Tilley was making significant money, and Brandon Knoll was getting paid well, and Puff Johnson ends up getting, half of what he was initially hoping to get because he didn't join until midseason. But there are more resources available at this point to go hit the transfer portal. So when you start looking at how big is this portal class going to be, what is Ohio State looking for? Well, we know when we look at this roster right now, John Mobley Jr., Amari Bynum, Anthony Thompson. Start with those 3, build around it. So that clearly shows us the need for a starting point guard and a starting center. Now, I do think that Josh Ojonwuno will be in that mix to be a starter, and he very well might be the starter when the season ends. But the fact remains, by the time they start playing basketball in November, Josh will have gone essentially 18 plus months without having played a game with the lights on and fans in the stands. So they're not just going to put all their eggs in that basket and say, he's our guy. Like, they're definitely going to go out and add a center to the mix. And then in the backcourt, it's going to be critical to add a couple of guards. And I think it starts with this team will be looking to add a high-level point guard, somebody who can come in, and I wouldn't expect it to just be like, oh, can they score 8 to 10 points a game and maybe play good defense and whatever. Like, I think of like a Jamari Wheeler from a couple years ago, or certainly you can go down the list of guys, whether it's Gabe Cupps or Quez Glover or just kind of Dale Bonner. Like, they want someone a step higher than all that. And I think that's probably as significant a priority as any position for Ohio State. This is something that when so much of this team has revolved around Bruce Thornton for 4 years, Ohio State has clear opportunity and potential and funds to go out and target high-level players. Now, like Jackson Shelstead in the portal from Oregon, I don't know that that's necessarily like the level that Ohio State will be getting. I mean, I had him preseason all Big Ten. He was a big part of the reason why I had Oregon so high. I mean, he's an all-conference experienced high-level Big Ten player. Now, he had some injuries this year. I don't know if that is ultimately the type of player that Ohio State will be trying to land, because it won't just be, hey, go get one guard. They're going to have to get certainly a starter, but there's no depth right now behind those guys. And that almost makes it as interesting as anything, because you look at Ohio State trying to recruit last year, and how do you get to a position where like you're signing this sounds like a backhanded compliment, and I don't know, I'm not sure the right phrase here. This is not meant to necessarily be a criticism, but like Gabe Cupps came in having been a starter at Indiana as a freshman when injuries forced him into the lineup. Not a significant statistical contributor, but a guy who had Big Ten moments or Big Ten minutes and Big Ten starts 2 years ago, and then was coming off an injury, but was not coming in saying, man, I'm going to go play 25 minutes a night. Like, recruiting a backup in this era is arguably more difficult than recruiting a starter, because you are going to have to pay whatever you're going to have to pay for someone who's going to have to accept the fact that they're going to come in and play behind Bruce Thornton and John Mobley. I mean, it was going to take something superhuman to dislodge one of those two guys from the starting lineup. And that's how a player like Gabe Cupps ends up becoming, alongside Tayson Chapman, primary options off the bench to back those guys up. It obviously didn't pan out for Gabe. And I think his season is as surprising to me as just about anything, because I've really felt, I shouldn't say that. There's quite a few things that were surprising, but I remain surprised that it didn't go better for Gabe Cupps. Clearly he was dealing with some, I believe it was a wrist injury as the season went on, and I think that probably impacted things. But for someone who has played high-level basketball growing up, was Ohio Mr. Basketball, has Big Ten experience, I thought he would be more steady and more of a contributor on this Ohio State team than what he ended up being. And it was surprising. Like, the statistic that started to go viral by the end of the season, that he had more fouls than points, like, that was surprising to me. Because I think he's a smarter, better player than what he showed this year. And I think I'm really interested to see what next season looks like for him and what level he is playing at next season. Similarly, both Tayson and Colin, we've seen moments where they've been impactful, and Tayson is the highest of those guys, certainly the highest rated of those guys. So when it comes to Chapman, when it comes to Cupps, when it comes to White, you know, you look at the total contributions here that Ohio State has to replace for next season. The three of them averaged a combined 6.9 points, 3.3 rebounds, and 2.3 assists per game. So that's, from a statistical standpoint, Ohio State will need to bring in guys, you know, who can maybe average that by themselves. I think that will be they need to reemphasize, like something we've been talking about. Like, they have to get the portal right this year, and they have to bring in guys who are going to be able to give them more than what the bench was able to give them. Like, you look at some of the numbers here where Ohio State was 327th nationally in percentage of bench minutes played. There were 2 games where Ohio State had no bench points at all, 5 games where there were 3 points or fewer from the bench. Ohio State, if you count Brandon Knoll as a starter, because he did start the first 10 games, but Ohio State's 5 primary starters: Bruce, Junie, Devin, Amari, Kristoff, and then add Knoll to that. That's 88.6% of Ohio State's points. And they need more guys who are able to contribute to that, so that those starting players are not shouldering that heavy of a load. I mean, it was too much. And of the guys that left this weekend, or whose intentions to leave were revealed this weekend, certainly Tayson had the highest ceiling. I think we can all agree on that. We can see that he was as we talked about a lot, highest rated player on the roster. You know, he did average 4.3 points per game. He had some spurts where he looked really effective. He had 3 games where he scored in double figures. I did think it was interesting when I was looking at this, and I wrote a couple of takeaways that are up. So Taysom scored 121 points this past season. 57 of them came in 5 games. And then from there, I mean, he did get injured in that Michigan game. He wasn't a contributor really in the TCU game. Did shoot 47.1% from 3, 24 for 51. And I did think a fully healthy offseason and all of that. I'm really interested to see where he ends up, because I think he's flashed the most, he's shown the most, and I'll be curious what that fit ultimately looks like for him. With Colin, I know I made this point on here a couple of times, and it's just something that really stuck with me as the year went on, but that the guy has not been healthy for almost 2 years. I mean, he suffered that injury, which I still to this day think was a dirty play. He goes up for the dunk late in the Green Bay game. The guy fouled him really hard, ends up with the leg injury, sits for a while, comes back, can play, has to sit, can play, sit, surgery in the offseason. Was not ever a linear or a straight line pattern of healthy play and growth for him. I mean, he did not have an offseason. He told me in the locker room in South Carolina that he nearly redshirted. It was right up until the start of the season before ultimately it was decided that he would play. But he wasn't healthy for much of the season. And that was as important as anything, I think, for this offseason, that he needs to get fully healthy and then see what that looks like and see where he can go and contribute and be fully healthy. And it was worth pointing out that TCU was one of his final choices out of high school. Northwestern was in the running there. We'll see what this looks like for Colin, because there was high level interest out of high school, but we never really got to see the fully healthy Colin White experience. And yeah, so we've talked about Gabe, talked about Taysom. It remains worth pointing out that then this means Ohio State has to get it right when it comes to adding a point guard and adding a center. And I would say that of the two, I would put the number one priority on the point guard. Center would be right behind that, but I do think there's reasonable expectation that Josh Ojonwuna is a starting caliber center who's going to have some rust to knock off, but he's a guy who can be a starter. He has been a starter. And Ivan Yagovin is a clearly growing backup. I mean, he's a serviceable big at this point who can give you contributions, who has the size and the frame. And if he continues to grow, just from a game standpoint, I don't want to say physically, because then what's he going to be, 7'3", 7'4"? I think we'll if his game continues to grow, that's a guy that can help you. That's a guy that can help you down low in the Big Ten. He's got a Big Ten type of body. I would just love to see Ohio State get a Morez Johnson type of player. That remains the thing that has not been on this roster for a long time. And maybe that's the type of center Ohio State's able to go out and target. But I do think with the lack of straight up guards on the roster, that to me becomes priority one. You've got to get the guard spot, and you got to get it correctly, or you have to do it correctly. That was weird grammar. There's also been, certainly some questions about this GM position, and will Ohio State hire a GM, and what would that look like? And I mean, it's still possible we see Ohio State add one, but the notion that Ohio State's going to bring in someone who's going to make roster decisions and do the negotiating and all the recruiting and that the coaching staff's going to go golf all off season, that's not how it works, and that's not how it will work. Ohio State may in fact add a GM to its coaching makeup this year, but also the rules are changing to where anybody that's on staff can also help with on-court coaching. Can't always help with recruiting, but I could foresee an avenue here where Ohio State's quote unquote GM is someone who, helps with fundraising and helps with, raising the profile of the program and resources and all that kind of stuff, but is also capable of helping coach, can work guys out and can be a contributor in practice. And That's what I more envision, and what I hear is more the vision for if Ohio State does hire a GM, quote unquote, for its basketball roster moving forward. It's also maybe worth pointing out that there was, President Trump did sign or issue that executive order that may or may not go into effect in August. I don't think anybody really understands this, but says the players can only transfer once without having to sit out. We'll see what will happen between now and August, but that could also have an impact on the portal too. And maybe that leads to some players who have already transferred once transferring again, because otherwise they fear they won't be able to transfer next year. Just another thing to kind of put in the back of our heads. One more thing on the portal, because I did see this this morning. 24/7 Sports reported this, but Devin Royal, obviously in the portal, he has entered with a do not contact tag. And there is a crystal ball projection having him to UConn, which would be a really interesting fit in my mind. I would be curious to see that. Stay tuned on where that goes, but that is interesting that Devin would enter with a do not contact tag. Now, last thing I want to get into here before we wrap this up is what we saw last night. Michigan winning the Big Ten's first national championship since I was in high school, which is a wild thought, and doing it with a former Buckeye and Roddy Gale, and with a coach that was very much in the mix at Ohio State. And it has been brought to my attention multiple times that my story that Ohio State's search was zeroing in on, or that Dusty May and Jake Diebler were cementing themselves as the top two candidates. That was a story written in Minnesota, in downtown Minneapolis, as Ohio State was in the Big Ten tournament. That was just an absolutely wild couple of days. Phone calls, conversations, all these sources that I was talking to, former players behind the scenes making a really strong push for Chris Gent. But certainly, I guess one thing to point out is that the narrative that Ohio State chose one person over another person isn't entirely accurate. And that's how I see a lot of this being framed. You do have guys who don't want to go to a certain school, and that is a thing. And that's not to say that schools don't get the coaches that they want, but that it's not as black and white as you might think. And it's not as simple as, they passed on someone. That's not exactly how this all went down. So keep that in mind as you sift through all this here, and as we, see that tweet continue to go viral. I wish that meant that more people were subscribing. I don't think that seems to be the case. But as far as Michigan winning, I have to think that this adds another wrinkle to next season. I mean, I think this puts even more of an emphasis on you have to get it right. The last season was certainly a step forward for Ohio State under Jake Diebler, and next season it feels like this increases the external pressure on where the program is and where it needs to be heading. Certainly, you don't hire a first-time coach without having a runway there, where there's going to be some on the job growth and learning and all those things. Progress is important, and I would wager that watching Michigan do what it did this year probably amps up some of that need to show progress and continue to build. And I do think we're looking at an Ohio State roster at this moment that has, can we say, 2.5 NBA guys, possibly 3. And that's the most NBA type talent we've seen on an Ohio State roster since EJ Liddell and Malachi Branham were playing together. So now it's up to the coaching staff and the transfer portal to build out around those players and to set Ohio State up to be in a position where it can have a deeper run and can put together a more high-level season. Can Ohio State spend the year ranked for most of it and be punching near the top of the Big Ten? I think those are more realistic expectations based on the core of talented players you have, and also the desire to continue to show growth and that things are moving in the right direction. And when you also do watch your rival go out and win its first national championship since 1989. That changes. I feel like that does change the external expectations of where Ohio State men's basketball should be. And it will be interesting to see how that now plays out as we get into the offseason and how that impacts the portal and how that impacts this roster construction for next year. So having said all that, stay tuned because there's going to be a lot of stuff happening here soon. I just, like I did the other day, just kind of wanted to get like a baseline podcast out. Like, here's kind of where things stand. Here's what the process could look like. Here's what we know at this point. This is all going to very rapidly start changing. So keep visiting dispatch.com. Look for the transfer tracker and the roster tracker if you're confused on who's still on the team and who's not. But I'll have lots more for you in these coming hours, days, weeks, months, until we get to mid-May, and then we can take some time off. But we'll get there when we get there. So I'm going to wrap this one up now. As always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thank you again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, for getting this out to you. I'll be back with you, I'm sure, by the end of the week. So stay tuned for more. Until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon. Want a huge deal on a large pizza? For a very limited time at Donato's, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. Yes, half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's. Gotta love more.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.